perfect shot, man.
This truly is a trophy, not because of what it is, but for what we had to accomplish to get it.
Companion training, I love it.
See how your heart rate is right now? This is what elk hunting's like. Now you gotta make a shot.
Welcome to the Geared for the Outdoors podcast, brought to you by Numa Outdoors. I'm your host and Numa team member, Will Cooper. The Geared for the Outdoors podcast is dedicated to bow hunters and all those who love the outdoors. Our mission here is to bring you information from industry experts and veteran hunters that can help better prepare you for your next hunt. We understand that our time in the outdoors is precious, and that's why Numa's mission is to bring you gear that is built to over-deliver, designed to outperform, and proven to outlast. To learn more, head to our website at numaoutdoors.com, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate y'all listening in, and we hope y'all enjoy. What's up, everybody? This is Will the Thrill coming back at y'all for another great episode of the Geared for the Outdoors podcast. I've been a little MIA, so I need to apologize for that, but I have been spending some time in the tree. I think y'all would understand. Trying to put down a big whitetail. Also been spending some time in the woods in South Texas with some of our recon team members chasing some giant bucks. But nevertheless, we're coming at y'all for another awesome episode. This episode, we're actually coming to y'all from our deer camp in Nebraska. I got to spend some time in deer camp with Josh Dahlke of Hunt Stand, as well as Logan Brecht from Sam Moore Media, as well as Mr. Aaron Gettys himself, cameraman extraordinaire. But we got to spend some time in deer camp chasing some big bucks in Nebraska. We'll talk about that here in a little bit with you guys, just kind of about the trials, tribulations. This is actually my first time going across state lines chasing whitetail with my bow. We've gotten to chase elk, mule deer, but this is the first time to chase whitetail with the bow out of the state of Texas. No feeders, no protein, no corn, no bait whatsoever. So I actually got to learn a lot about hunting over scrapes and sitting up in a tree for 11 to 12 hours a day. So if you are chasing after whitetail yourself in the rutcation, this is a podcast for you. We just want to thank all y'all that have been listening to these podcasts, because there's a lot of others out there that y'all could be spending your time listening to. So we just want to thank all of y'all that have been tuning in. If this is your first time, make sure you go and rate and review for us. That helps us out a lot. So we just want to thank all y'all again, and we hope y'all enjoy this episode of the Geared for the Outdoors podcast. We're sitting here with a crew that I'm not quite sure I know what words to put with this crew, but it's a pretty damn good crew. And we've been spending, what are we on, day 7 now? Or day 6? Day 6 out here in Nebraska chasing after some whitetail. Josh Dahlke from Hunt Stand managed to put one on the ground, but I'm still trying to get one myself. But we're just going to sit here and see what rabbit holes we go down on this one. I know we're going to talk about mountain lions, porcupines, and how to occupy your time in the stand during the rut. But I want to go around the table real quick, and then we're going to get Tyler on here too, which, Tyler, you're getting on here. Yeah. But we're going to get Tyler on here in a little bit. We're out here at C-Bar Outfitters, and we're going to sit here and we're going to talk. But I want to go around the table. Josh, let's get 30,000-foot view of everybody first. I start off the podcast with this every time, so give us the DL of Josh Sunrise Dahlke.
Okay, well, Will was attempting to identify a synonym for degenerate prior to starting this podcast. Despite my journalism background and my extensive experience as a writer, I couldn't really come up with a better word. So I'm not saying that describes me, but I don't know why he wanted that. He wanted that synonym, but he can figure that out for himself. I work for Hunt Stand. I run the content division, meaning all the videos and articles and emails and all the content that we produce. I am in charge of all that. I'm also a freelance writer and content producer for a number of outdoor media outlets, magazines, websites, you name it. Been doing this for about 10 years, and I do it because I love hunting and I love to have an excuse to do more hunting.
I like an excuse too. Logan,
What's up?
Mr. Porcupine Kicker himself.
Oh,
Give us the
man.
deal of you, man.
Yeah, my name is Logan Brecht. I work for a company called More Media, which is contracted through Hunt Stand, and we do a lot of stuff with them. Do a lot of stuff with Josh, and basically, I got into video a couple years, 5 years ago maybe. Got into bass fishing hardcore. Started filming that. Ended up graduated high school. Got a job with the media company More Media, and have been doing that full time since. And that's where I am now, filming hunts for Josh and doing different stuff in the outdoors industry, media wise.
Not going to college.
No, not going to college. That's been my decision, at least for the first year here and seeing how it goes. And so far, I'm loving it, and I haven't seen a reason not to go to college yet. So
And you don't get a bill in the mail every month like I still do.
exactly, and I
You
mean,
still get that?
Hell, we don't need to talk about my financial situation.
Mr. Aaron Gettys, Mr. AG Money, cameraman extraordinaire. Tell us about yourself.
I wouldn't go that far, but I'm Aaron Gettys. Kind of got into hunting since growing up in hunting. Got into some photography as I was running a ranch in Texas. Wanted to have better,
You were
higher
running
quality.
it.
I guess you could say that a little bit.
Okay.
Wanted to have better, better photos for our Instagram, for my hunters, that kind of stuff. And so I kind of just delved down into that rabbit hole of getting photos and videos for guys. And
So you're an Instagram hunter.
Basically, he's Insta famous.
You're Insta
I'm
famous.
Insta famous.
Okay.
No, and
this
so
guy.
just kind of one thing led to another, and you and I had been friends since college and went on some hunts together, and now I just kind of, I guess, do a little freelance photography stuff for you guys whenever I can.
I like it. More media. Pick them up. Or Hunt Stand. Contract
one
them
of
up.
the two.
One of the two. Let's talk about deer hunting first before we dive down the rabbit holes. Let's talk about the deer hunting this week, Josh. It's been a little tough. Weather's been crazy. You came out here in October, did a little scouting, but it's been a little weird. Warm, cold, windy.
Yeah, it has been tough. I think after we've evaluated it for the last 6 days, inside and out, the consensus is there's a lot of different things going on at one time. I still can't quite figure out what stage of the rut we're in per se, but I think between the warm weather, I mean, if you don't subscribe to the moon situation, which science has proven that the moon really doesn't have an impact on the rut or deer activity, but if you do subscribe to that, you would think that the moon phase would be pretty good right now for daylight movement.
Yeah.
It hasn't been very good. It's been unseasonably warm. There's been an unseasonable primary south wind when you'd expect to be more of a north or west wind at this time of year. And just, I don't know what's going on with the deer, but it's been hard to find them moving during daylight hours. I think there's a lot of nighttime stuff going on. The cameras that we have had out have verified a lot of that. Seems to be quite a bit of movement at night. But Will was able to get into a pocket of deer.
The honey
that-
hole.
The honey hole, the ground zero
But-
now, I guess.
But yet I haven't killed one yet, and I got one morning left.
He has not killed one. He's maybe or maybe not had a chance. He decided to wave at it to introduce himself, and
We'll talk
apparently,
about that.
but no, I think there's probably at least one or maybe a couple hot does in that area. It's the only explanation I can come up with why so many of those deer tend to be concentrated where you've been hunting, and why so many different individual bucks have been rolling through there and scent checking and sniffing the trails on does and whatnot. I think there's something going on in there in terms of at least one hot doe spreading her scent around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of deer in there. Let's talk about your deer kill. Just the process leading up to it. You don't want to talk about the trials and tribulations of this deer. From seeing deer, not seeing deer, forgetting to put the windows down on the box blind.
I guess we might as well start from the first morning.
Let's do it,
Oh,
man.
boy.
And I want to hear about the porcupine on the day of the kill.
Well, I guess it doesn't even start the first morning. It starts about a month ago. I came out here, got together with Tyler. We hung some what we thought were going to be killer setups with camera stands. So double sets on 2 wood lots to accommodate what we thought were going to be the primary wind directions for this time of year, which by all means should have been the case, but things have just been different. So we put a lot of effort into getting those stands set. We put out cameras in strategic locations. We were getting a lot of good pictures. And so we came into the hunt expecting that we were going to go off of those game plans. And the first spot, turns out some dogs rolled in there, as you experienced. I was like, man, this is Will's first out-of-state whitetail hunt. Like, the whole point was try to find the best spot and have you guys go there. And we thought that's what that was going to be, and it probably would have been, but I think you saw some critters the first morning you didn't expect.
Well, luckily, though, we were getting out of the stand. Like, we were just about on our way out. Aaron looks to the left, and he goes, dude, there's a freaking dog over there. And I'm like, what, a coyote? Because we've been hearing coyotes all around us this morning. He goes, no, like a freaking black lab. I'm like, what? There's a Great Pyrenees and some other kind of dog just freaking barking and chasing squirrels up trees.
Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't understand that dynamic, usually when you get dogs running around the countryside like that, whether they're full-out feral dogs or not, even if they're just running off of a farm and gallivanting across the countryside day to day and then going back home, a lot of times those dogs are running deer. That's just what they do. They like to chase deer or any other critters for that matter. They're just out here having a good time chasing stuff around. It's just their instinct to do that when they are roaming the countryside.
Let's set the setting for everybody that's listening for where we're hunting in Nebraska, because I feel like Nebraska's not talked a lot when it comes to whitetail hunting. I don't feel like you hear much about it. You always hear about Kansas, Ohio, Iowa, but let's kind of set the scene for everybody. What kind of terrain we're in, big food plots, there's neighbors around, there's lots of traffic, but the deer seem to be used to most of it, except for the whole dog part.
Well, I've done a lot to talk about and promote deer hunting in Nebraska during the last probably 6 to 8 years. Part of me wishes I wouldn't have done so because I've seen some spots get burned up as a result of it. But what people don't realize about Nebraska is it still continues to be largely a sleeper state. You got states like South Dakota and North Dakota where people have really caught on to the quality of the whitetail hunting there for non-residents, primarily for archery hunters, because it's been classically easy to get tags. And there's a lot of really good public land in the Dakotas. Nebraska doesn't have as much public land, border to border, but where there is public land, generally it's pretty good. And it's just, there's such a huge diversity of habitat across Nebraska that people don't even realize, because if you travel the main highway corridors going across the state, it might look like there's not a whole lot to offer, but as you go throughout the state from east to west, north to south, there's a lot of different stuff going on between just the plains and the Cottonwood Creek bottoms. I mean, that's kind of the cookie cutter stuff. But then you've also got the Sandhills, which has huge wildlife diversity between all the upland birds and the whitetails, and also the mule deer that people don't really quite realize. There's an exceptional quality of mule deer in the Sandhills, especially on some of the bigger private ranches that would rival anywhere you'd hunt mule deer in the West. If you get big enough contiguous tracts that are well managed where those deer can get to an older age class, you can get world-class mule deer in the Sandhills. You get further out west, you've got the Pine Ridge Escarpment, which is basically a miniature version of the Black Hills in South Dakota.
Yeah.
And out there, you've also got whitetails and mule deer mixed with agriculture and a decent amount of public land. So you got all these different types of habitats spread throughout the state, and then there's one continuous element that you're going to see no matter where you are, and that's going to be tree lots that were planted during like the 1800s and 1900s, a lot of which was incentivized by the government during the Dust Bowl era, when people essentially were paid to plant trees because the erosion was so bad and the dust storms were so bad, and that kids would literally go to school back then and not come home. They'd get buried in sand and dust during some of those dust storms. It was so. If you talk about the Dust Bowl, Nebraska was, I don't know if it was the focal point of that, but a lot of it was going on here, and literally the land was just getting blown away because there wasn't a lot of root systems and vegetation to control that erosion. So some of the early homesteaders were incentivized to plant trees to help prevent that erosion, because anytime you have vegetation, it's going to help to anchor the ground.
Yeah.
So in areas like we're in right now, west of the Niobrara River, it's you got all these little tree lots that are out here that were planted. People were actually paid to plant them, and the intention of the government was to have people plant trees all over the place to anchor the ground. But really what they did was they wanted tillable ground. They wanted ground that they could pasture for cattle. So they didn't want to plant trees all over the damn place because it's harder to run managed row crops and whatnot.
Is that why all these, y'all call them woodlots, tree lots?
Woodlots, tree lots, windbreaks, shelter belts.
Yeah, shelter belts. That's
lots
what
of
I've been
different
hearing
names
Tyler
for
say.
'em.
That's why they're either running north or south, or I guess north and south or west and east.
Yeah, so what ultimately happened was people were incentivized to plant these trees. The goal of the government was to have them plant them all over the place, spread out, so that they could anchor the ground. But people still ended up collecting their incentives, their cash for planting trees, but they did it to protect their homesteads from wind and just some of the battering that it would get from the seasons, namely winter.
Yeah.
And also to protect their cattle. So they would plant these based on the prevailing winds, because the cattle, you'll notice that if conditions get bad enough, I mean, they're not necessarily the smartest animals in the world, but you're going to see cows standing out with their ass to the wind, or you're going to see them hiding behind something as a windbreak. And so people planted all these trees, and so they did it based on prevailing wind direction. So a lot of the lots you're going to see are going to be just planted in a straight line, and they're just used as windbreaks for the cattle. Well, ultimately that ended up creating a lot of deer habitat.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, primarily whitetails, because they need cover to survive and to feel comfortable. And then you saw the influx of agriculture, which across the country, I mean, a lot of regions in the country, whitetails were pretty scarce. Like even where I grew up in central Minnesota, it was kind of the same situation. It was big timber, very low deer densities, and as soon as people started clearing timber and planting row crops, there was more food, so the whitetails proliferated. And they don't need a whole lot of cover to be able to survive and hide, but the one limiting factor that they need to build a population is food. With natural browse, there's only so much available.
Yeah.
So as soon as people started planting corn and beans and row crops, whitetails blew up all over the country. And then in areas like we're in now, they also blew up because they had
big and fat,
big, fat, corn-fed whitetails that, there's still some places out in more remote country in the prairie where there's whitetails that might go most of their life without even seeing people because they're just out in these little remote pockets.
Yeah.
Because they can make a living just about anywhere. But that's kind of what we're dealing with here is just scatterings of tree lots that were planted, and then a lot of either row crops for farmers that they sell as grain, or people who are planting crops just to feed cattle, and the deer feed off that. They go duck into the trees during the day, or if there's
That's all
any
they gotta
tall
do.
grass or CRP, or standing corn until that gets cut, and they can make a pretty good living. But that's the nature of hunting out here, is just patterning them based off of the really pretty basic structure and habitat.
Which I feel like it's pretty much taken us all 6 days to get that figured out.
Yeah.
And it's come down to the wire. So let's talk about your deer for a minute. But before we dive into it, how you killed it, where you killed it, what you killed it with, we can go on that if you want. I want to hear Logan's side. How was this week of hunting with Josh through all the trials, the trials that this week has brought?
Dude, it has been an interesting week. Sitting here day after day with Josh. I think it all started with that first morning. He had to hang a camera stand for me because the winds ended up to where we needed to be at that stand, and that was the only stand Josh had not hung a camera stand. So we get in there in the dark, everything's going well, and he goes up the tree, and all I hear is just swearing.
And you weren't rolling on this.
No, I was rolling for a little bit, but I probably should have rolled more. But yeah, all I could hear was just yelling, and not like just a quiet yell, just swearing at this tree. I was like, "What is going on?" And I think like 20 minutes passed. He comes down and talks to me. He's like, "Oh man, I can't put you up in that." He goes back up, starts trying to fiddle with it again. Same thing, just getting mad at this tree stand. I'm like, all right. He finally gets it up. It was not a good morning. And I think that kind of just set it up for the rest of the trip.
It set the tone.
It really set the tone.
And I kind of feel to blame for this because you asked me the night before, you're like, all right, well, we got two spots. There's one that's got a camera stand, or there's this other one that we've been seeing lots of deer, but you're going to have to hang a camera stand. And me and Aaron, being from Texas, I'm like, I haven't freaking hung one of those in like 6 years. I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this in the dark, going to a blind I've never been to. Like, first we got to find the stand. Like, no. I was like, no, man, you can have that one. So I kind of feel I feel a little bit to blame on this.
No,
one.
I knew the level of risk that was involved, because anybody who's done any hanging hunts, if you do it more than once, you're gonna run into scenarios where you just get the wrong tree, and that tree wants to just eat you alive.
And that tree wanted you.
That tree, between the slight angle that it had and some of the knots that were in it, where I had this vision of where I was going to be able to hang that stand, I just hadn't considered it thoroughly enough. And really, Logan, the only reason it was such a debacle is because I was looking out for you. I was like, there's no way I can make him sit.
He's looking out for you.
There's no way I could make him sit in that thing for hours. Like, I got it set, and I was like, that's pretty bad. Like, it's leaning and it's angled downward. So he's going to, just like ended up happening anyways, you felt like you're going to fall out of the damn thing the whole time.
The whole time it was just looking at the ground. It wasn't great. We got it done though.
He would start nodding off, and he'd do that deal where you nod off, and even if you're just on level ground, sitting in a desk chair or something, bored at work, and you nod off, and it feels like you're falling. That was happening to him, but actually, in reality, he was going to fall.
It was a whole new level of like just this trance that you got put into when you doze off, and it's like you could just feel yourself going down to the ground. It was not a great setup.
He turned over to me 3 different times. He's like, "Oh, I started to nod off again, and I felt like I was just going to fall out of the tree." I mean, we're wearing safety harnesses, but still, nobody wants to fall out of their stand.
So this is morning one.
Yeah.
I don't think anything happened to y'all the first afternoon, right? Because y'all went back to the same area, but just a little bit different stand, if I remember correctly.
No, we went. Isn't that the morning we went and sat on the ground?
Oh, where did we go sit?
It was right where me and Mark killed the turkey.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did a ground setup that evening because I was so pissed off at that general area where we had that stand situation. Because it wasn't just the stress of hanging the stand. It was the fact that by the time we hung it and I got up in the tree, your goal always to go into a tree stand is to not be sweating by the time you sit down. And I wasn't wearing too many layers, but by the time I got done messing with that thing for 30 minutes or whatever it took, I was soaked in sweat, and I had heard at least 1 or 2 deer run away. And you go in there with that first set and you feel like it's going to be the best one of the week because you've been thinking about it, you're jacked up, like you feel like everything's dialed.
It's fresh.
Yeah, it's fresh, you're in the zone, and then you just hear deer running away because you're up there with your headlamp on that I didn't want to have on to begin with, messing with this stand. And yeah, you hear some deer run away, and Logan's like, yeah, I just saw this white flash running across. I'm like, yeah, that was probably a giant buck.
It was a booner.
Running away from us. So, no, we ended up sitting on the ground that evening at a different spot, and we had some close encounters. We just found some fresh sign, built a natural ground blind, set up with what we thought the good wind direction was going to be. Yeah. And we had a few deer walk in on us, but it was just
it was a pretty cool setup, though.
It was a cool setup. It was a deadly setup if the right deer would have came by, but it was 2 does, a fawn, and then a forky all came by. They all got downwind of us, and they didn't completely spook, but they knew something was up.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, first day done. Second day, I think was kind of about the same. I felt like the first 2-3 days was us really trying to figure it out. But I want to talk about when y'all got into the box blind.
Oh, man.
Because there's a box blind sitting in the middle of a shadow hunter that we sat in one afternoon and saw some deer. But to kind of preface this, Tyler had told us about there's an actual mountain lion in the area that they've been catching on game camera. And so you guys being from Minnesota walk into a blind with no headlamp on. Let's hear about that.
It just happens to be that me and Josh were in New Mexico a month ago, and me and him have never seen a mountain lion before. Like I've never even thought of it ever. So first morning we were driving down this long dirt road forever, and all of a sudden we take a turn and there's just this huge mountain lion standing right in the middle of the road, perfectly in the headlights, just all curled up, just looking right at us. And me and Josh were like, what is that?
It's trying to figure out how to kill you.
Yeah. And then the guy told us that's a mountain lion, and we were just like, what? It turned and thing was massive. The tail was just all the way out there, and then
it was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge.
And then you hear the story about this one out here.
Yeah.
From Tyler. And then did y'all forget your headlamps that morning, or you purposely walked in dark?
No.
I don't like using a headlamp ever unless I have to when I'm deer hunting. I just don't. Even if it doesn't matter, or if it doesn't really bother the deer, I just feel like it does, so it screws with my confidence. And I don't like using one unless I have to. Plus, if as soon as you turn that thing on, it destroys your night vision. So
yeah,
if you can get somewhere and you can just use the starlight or the moonlight, you might as well. But as soon as you turn on even look at your cell phone or turn on your headlamp, anybody who's done it knows that, I don't know, it dilates it does something with your pupils or whatever. It destroys your night vision for a while. It's hard to get it back once
you can't see crap.
No, you can't see anything. So I decided we were going to go in stealth mode, and as soon as we left the truck, I took like 10 steps, and then all I could think about was this lion that's been sighted like on one of the neighboring properties. And we're walking in the dark, and I started to get my own head about it, and I was it was just a race to try to get to that blind.
Yeah, I mean, we finally get into it, and he's like, "Oh man, I don't know about you, but the whole time all I was thinking about was that mountain lion." I was like, "Oh, dude, same." I was freaking out. I low-key had a panic attack. I'm just glad we made it.
And then this is the morning where y'all learned that you could taste the sunrise.
No, I think it was smell
the
sunrise.
Smell the sunrise.
The smell of the morning sun, man. There's nothing like it.
So did you see any deer at first light, or what?
Yeah, why don't you tell us about that?
Let's hear this. Trials and tribulations of Nebraska deer hunting.
Well, so as anybody, very few people realize what the morning light actually looks like unless you hunt or you fish or you have some reason to be out there when it's going from dark to dawn. And it's light enough to see anywhere well before sunrise, and for that matter, usually well before shooting light. If there's no cloud cover, and even if there's not much of a moon, all it takes is just the littlest bit of glow of that sun starting to try to come up in the east, and you're going to be able to see pretty decent. So I decided that we were going to sit in this blind, and we were not going to open any of the windows because I didn't want to let any of our scent out. And if you sit in that style of blind, this one was a shadow hunter, I believe. You've got the outer window, which is just like solid blocks that completely black it out.
Yeah.
And then you've got the inner window, which is actually like a window. It's got clear like plexiglass that you can see through, so you can still keep it down, keep your scent contained. But if you want to open it to get a shot after you spot something, you just pop it open. Well, I was like, nope, we're locking down in here. I was checking my phone. I was waiting until it was getting to be about legal shooting light. I was like, we ain't opening any of this stuff until we have to.
And the thing, I don't think I've ever been anywhere where it's that pitch black.
No.
Like, it was
the darkest place on earth.
You couldn't see anything if you tried.
I ain't been in anything that pitch black till the last time I got locked in a closet.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about that. But we're sitting in this thing, and it was like,
you're in a dark place.
Your eyes are wide open, and it is black. And every once in a while, I turn on my phone or grab Logan's arm or something just to freak him out. He's still trying to recover from the mountain lion anxiety. But we're sitting there, and actually, after this happened, we all talked, and I for some reason I thought Hunt Stand maybe had something wrong with the sunrise time. That actually wasn't the case. It was just that, like I just mentioned a minute ago, it's light enough to see well before sunrise. So I had forgot about that factor. I mean, I've only been hunting for like 25 years, and somehow I just that went to the back of my brain. So all I was thinking was, all right, we're going to open it right before legal shooting light. And we're sitting there in the pitch black, and all of a sudden I was just about, Logan's like, why did we get out here so early? Like, we don't have, it's going to be 2.5 hours until it's actually time for us to even like begin thinking about doing anything. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. And actually we were kind of like pissed off at you guys, because we're like, those guys wanted to get out here so early. Like, what's the point? Like, it's 2 hours early. And I was just about going to move my stool aside to lay on the ground and take a nap for an hour. So I was like, man, we got a lot of time to kill. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, like, through one of the little cracks between the windowsills, I'm like, oh, is that light? Like, what is that? And you could just see the light piercing through. And I crack open the front window of the blind, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, I could see all the way across the field. And I'm like, oh, Hunt Stand, the sunrise somehow was off. It was off by an hour. Well, what I didn't realize was that, you could see early.
Yeah.
So we open the windows, and I'm just like, I wonder how many deer have already walked by us.
You probably had like 2 150s walk by already.
Well, I mean, it wasn't legal shooting light, but at the same time, like, who knows what was crossing across that field in that first half light. So anyways, we got in the zone then, and I'm just like, man, this is just not stacking up to be a good deal. The first morning,
It's just another morning with Josh.
yeah.
I felt like y'all just had one bad thing after the other just happen, and then like the best was the morning that y'all killed. You and I first get to the stand, Aaron, and I literally just pulled my bow up to stand, and Aaron's like, dude, you gotta check your phone. You gotta check your phone, dude. And I'm like, what? and I look at the group text from y'all, and I don't know how Aaron and I didn't like freaking fall out of the blind, because I'm going to read this directly from you. It says, Logan just walked into a porcupine and we both screamed. Thought it was a raid through the local mountain lion. So much for the stealthy entry. I can feel the damn tree just shaking from Aaron laughing so hard.
Dude, I about lost it. Because, like, we were in the blind. It was like 5:30.
Stealthy entry.
And my phone buzzes. I was like, "What? No one's texting me at 5:30 in the morning." So I look at it, and it's Josh. But our service was bad, so his text came through backwards. So I got the one that said, "So much for the stealthy entry." I was like, "What is he talking about?" And then about 2 minutes later, the second one comes through and goes, Logan walked into a porcupine, thought it was a mountain lion. We both screamed, and then I almost fell out of the tree, and I'm laughing, and the whole tree's just shaking. And Will goes, "Dude, what?"
And then
finally got it. I was like, "Look at your phone," and he comes through, and then he looks up at me, and we were both just almost rolling out of the tree at this point.
And I hit you back, and I'm like, "So has he got needles in him?" He's like, "No," and then I know like. What, an hour, 45 minutes later or something like that, we finally get light
out.
There's a group message from you, just this freaking lacrosse boot just full of needles. He's like, I stand corrected. But I want everybody to hear your side of it, because that's the freaking best. And I want to hear what was going through Josh's mind while y'all were walking to y'all setup that morning.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Tell them what was going through your mind.
So, well, I mean,
the mountain lion.
So we came into that morning, and this was what was it?
Well,
was it day 4 or day 5? It was day 5.
I guess we should back up
Yesterday, wasn't it?
We back up a little bit, because the night before you had found a scrape that had been getting hit pretty hard. So that night after we ate dinner, we actually went in there and set a camera up and freshened up the scrape. So that's what y'all were sitting on, so the listeners understand that.
Yeah, so we were having a tough time. We were not connecting anywhere we sat. I mean, I did rattle and call up 2 forkies in 2 different spots, but other than that, those were the only bucks I had seen in 4 days, and it was just a rough go. So tried to think outside the box. We ended up just finding a fresh scrape line, and decided to roll in there that evening, move the cell cam onto a scrape, freshen it up, got a natural ground blind built within range, and if the wind direction was right and if something showed up on that camera, we were gonna sit that blind, because it's the rut. You got to be where there's deer. Anytime you got does, there could be a buck at any given time. So within about 3 hours of us freshening up that scrape and setting out that cell cam, we had a couple of does come through and check it. And so I was like, all right, well, we might as well go sit that thing the next morning, because there could easily be a buck on their tail if they keep coming through there and doing that. So we went in there, or we made the plan to go in there. We came in the morning.
Pitch black again, no headlights.
Pitch black, no headlights. Had this whole entrance strategy based on the wind of how we were going to get in there without blowing anything where we thought there might be deer.
Yeah, we game planned it the night before.
Oh,
for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, we plotted the whole deal. And so I was finally feeling refreshed. Like at that point, I was pretty like dejected about what had been going on. I'm like, all right, we actually have a plan to work on. So we went in there that morning, and we parked the truck, and I was feeling good about things. I saw a buck in the headlights that morning, and I was like, all right, this could be good. And we start working our way in there, and I'm like, I'm going in, no lights, I'm not turning on my headlamp. I had it on my head only if we needed it for emergencies, but I was like, I'm not turning this thing on, because there was even more starlight that morning. And probably about 50 yards from the truck, I'm like, start thinking about that lion again. And I'm just like, man, and it just, your mind starts going, and one thing leads to another, and you know how those things go after stuff. Like, it's, by the time they're on you, it's too late. So, I mean, I start going through all this in my head, and like.
But what'd you do?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, what'd you do?
you know,
Start.
Say it.
No, you got to tell him. I need the world to know this.
so we're walking in, and I'm thinking about what would go down if one was stalking us. And, I mean, you think about a lion, it's stalking its prey. If it's going after a herd of animals or something, like, it's going to take the last one. That's just the way it goes. Like, it's going to get the last one, and it's going to take it out. And I noticed Logan was a few steps behind me, off to my left shoulder. And so I was like, well, I mean, it's going to be one of us, so it might as well not be me. So I picked up my pace a little bit, and I tried keeping him a little just slightly behind me. And then all of a sudden I noticed he picked up his pace. So I picked up my pace some more to try to get ahead of him. Next thing you know, we're like damn near running to where we're trying to go. And I'm like,
I knew what was going through your mind. I was like, no, this ain't happening.
And then I started to the guilt just started to set in, and I'm just like, I could just picture being at his funeral, and nobody would know except me what had happened, my negligence that would have been involved, like letting him just be the bait. So I'm just like, you know what? I might as well just give each of us a fair shake, or I'm never going to be able to live with this. So I slowed down, and next thing you know, I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to walk at the same pace. So we're walking in the same line, and next thing you know, we're about halfway to the blind. And you know, when there's a panic situation, I've only been in a couple of them, but it is true that like everything goes into slow motion. I almost flipped my truck one time, and it was like time froze. I could remember every little detail. It was the weirdest thing. And that's what happened there in the dark that morning. All of a sudden,
Yep.
it took me what seemed like an eternity to process that Logan was swearing, yelling, and running backwards because something was going on.
Did you drop the camera? Or you held on the
dude.
whole time?
Well, I was just minding my own business, walking, and all of a sudden I hit something like, oh, and then it moves, and I can see it just looking at me, and I just scream and back up. And as I back up, all I can see is Josh go, with his arms raised in the air, just backing up with me. Yeah.
I can't remember what your exact words were, but you were like, you like yelled and you like screamed and swore, and you're like, something just touched me. And then so it's like I'm just like everything's immediately in slow-mo because it's like what, like he's yelling, and like we're trying to make this stealthy entrance, and like something has gone seriously wrong. And I look over to my left where he's starting to run backwards, and then it kept like all I heard was like something just touched me, and all I see was like this tan colored figure when my eyes finally like caught focus, and we were already both thinking lion.
Mm-hmm.
And I just screamed like full bore. Someone, I bet you somebody could have heard me.
I might have heard y'all. I thought I heard something that morning, but I didn't
probably
know what.
did.
I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
I'd heard something. I'm like, what the?
It was pure. It was pure utter fear and shock. Like I just saw it. In hindsight, it was like it didn't even make sense because it was so low to the ground. Like it wouldn't have been a lion, but like I just saw this tan figure, and I'm just like, ah. And
I'm pretty sure I heard you because I remember sitting in the blind that morning thinking, it just sounded like I heard two teenage girls like partying in one of these bean fields. I'm like, what was that?
Far away from
No,
us.
I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, oh, whatever. And then
no,
yeah.
so I screamed. I like got into a defensive position like I often do, like when that type of thing happens. Like I didn't go running, but I just like all my muscles tensed up, and I raised my crossbow in one hand, my shooting stick in the other, like about ready to use them as weapons.
You ready to go down fighting?
Oh yeah, because I'd already thought about how I was going to fight off the lion. I was going to swing my crossbow at him, hit him with the shooting stick, and then like try to cover my back of my neck with my hands, because that's what you're supposed to do if you get attacked by a lion or a bear, so they don't get your spinal column, because that's what they're going to go for. And then I don't know how I saw it because it was pretty dark, but I was like, "That's porcupine, dude. It's a freaking porcupine."
Yeah.
He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, I immediately calmed down. And then I was just pissed. I was just freaking pissed because I was like, we just screamed at the top of our lungs on the way into our setup, like, this is cursed. Like, we're not going to see nothing's going to be coming, at least at first light.
No.
And then
You see, I didn't think that far ahead, and all I did was run and think that I had this camera that was very important to what we were doing, and I was about to throw the whole camera at the thing and run. I didn't know what the hell to do.
and then what happened?
Well, so we start walking toward the blind. So I went from scared to just pissed off, and I just go, "What's wrong with you, man?" And you're just like, "Dude, what? Like, I don't know what was going. Like, I don't know. You were just like trying to defend yourself."
Dude, I was flustered.
And then I was like, I was just like, all right, I guess I could have a heart.
me.
Like, the dude just did run into a wild animal. It wasn't a lion, but it was pretty jarring. And then we got like probably about 100 more yards, and I just started laughing. Like, and we were just
We sat there for a good like 20 seconds, just on our knees, just laughing. Yeah.
So we got set up, and I'm just like, well, whatever. None of this is meant to be. It is what it is. Like, just we sat down and just got into our position in this blind, and I just started to realize, like, oh, none of this is really that serious. Like, whatever. It is what it is. If we see a deer, we see a deer. And hung out there for a while, and started to get a little bit bored. I thought I could see the entire area around us. I was like, well, I'm going to see a deer long before it will ever get near us. And I did the stupid thing, and I got on my cell phone, and I started looking at Instagram and just trying to kill some time.
I thought you were going to say TikTok.
No, haven't gone there yet, but I started to try to distract myself, and I see something in my periphery, and I realize it's deer like 10 yards from us. And I just go, "Don't move." He's like, "What?" I was like, "Don't move." And these two does walk up right on our line at the edge of this grass that we're sitting in, and they stop in front of us. And I thought they were just going to keep going down the line, but for whatever reason, they decided to stop and feed right in the grass that we were sitting in, and then they started walking toward us, and they got to 2 yards. Literally, they got to 6 feet, and they were sitting there just munching off goldenrod and just browsing on whatever natural forbs were there in the grass. And they had not a clue that we were there whatsoever. Like, none of the scent that we had laid down 36 hours earlier trying to bust out those shooting lanes in that grass, they didn't smell that. They didn't realize we were there. They were just looking right through us like a deer does when it doesn't see you. And they're just munching and munching. They don't care. And then all of a sudden the one just like, you see a deer and it's looking through you, and then all of a sudden it just pegs you. And it stops, and it kind of turns its head sideways. And then it's like, oh crap, like, what is that thing? And it did like the reverse jump, and it stopped. And it still wasn't sure of itself, and I was like, "No, I'm just tripping." I'm not seeing nothing. And they just moseyed on their way, just kept on going, browsing down the line. Then they got downwind of us, started stomping their feet, looking around, not doing a full out blow, but just kind of doing the thing that they do. It sounds like they're just kind of like shooting air out their nostrils, just like a type of deal, but not the full out blow that's going to alert every deer in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And they just did that for about 15 minutes. They'd browse, and then they'd look in our direction, stomp their feet, do that little sound, and then they go back to browsing, and then they just slowly fed off and went back to in their bedding area across the fence into the neighbors. And I looked at Logan and I said, I mean, after all that had gone on during the last several days, all the frustrations and stuff, I looked at him and I said, that's why we do this, dude.
Mhm.
Like, we just had deer walk up to us at 2 yards, and we're looking them square in the eyes, and they're browsing on goldenrod right in front of us. Like, it was just super cool, you know. A lot of people could never even imagine what that experience would be like. And so I was pretty satisfied, but they took off. They went back to bed. I'm like, all right, well, they just laid down a fresh scent trail coming down that line. It's the rut. Like, anything could happen. So I started rattling, did a rattling sequence, did some grunting, and waited about 10 minutes. Wasn't seeing anything. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just have a little bit of coffee. It's been kind of a crazy morning. So I bust out the coffee. We start drinking coffee, just sitting there relaxing, kind of zoning out. Once again, like, it's one of those spots where you feel like you can see everything.
Mm-hmm.
But whitetails, people call them ghosts for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, another deer just materializes at 10 yards from us. And I'm just like, where did this thing come from? In hindsight, I think this buck, I mean, he certainly came into the rattling sequence.
Yeah.
In combination with, there was a fresh scent trail there from those 2 does, whether they're an estrus or not, it's does. He's going to come and see what they got going on. But what I think happened was right when I had zoned out for maybe 30 seconds or a minute, and he probably came running down that line, and that's why he just appeared there like that. He just happened to catch that short period of time where I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
And looked up, and there he was. And there was nothing we could do about it because he was going to cross in front of us, going left to right at about 10 yards. I couldn't raise my crossbow. Logan couldn't grab the camera. But I knew, or at least I thought, he was going to do probably similar to what those does did. They went off to our right. I had a little purposeful spot there of brush that would give me some cover so I could move around. And so he went over there. He got behind that brush. And I looked at Logan and I was like, I should probably shoot this deer. And he was
Logan's response? Yeah.
He goes, you better shoot this deer. And he was a 2-year-old mainframe 10-point with tall tines. Quite honestly, he, if he could have got to 4, he probably would have been a pretty significant deer. But I hunted in Kentucky about 10 years ago on this incredible property that was managed for upper age class deer, and I went out to go do my first evening sit. And the guy who owns the place came up to me and he said, after they had told me about everything they'd done on the property and how they're trying to raise booners, and he had dumped all this money into it, and they're only shooting 4-year-olds or better, and they had all these deer in a photo album with names and blah 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 blah. He came up to me before the first evening that we went out, and he said, "Now you go out there tonight, and whatever you see, you shoot what makes you happy. Don't worry about any of this other stuff that we got going on here. You just shoot what makes you happy." And that stuck with me ever since that hunt. I've followed that mantra, and I've tried to pass it on to other people, because that's really what it all comes down to.
Yeah,
100%. We do all this stuff, and it's there's a lot of different social pressures and stuff revolving around deer hunting.
You can't eat the antlers.
Yeah, I mean, you got people coming from all angles these days, especially with social media.
Yeah.
And it's like, at the end of the day, we're out here to have fun. We're out here to interact with a species that we admire and respect. And we're out here to make some meat, have a good time. If we can shoot a big buck or get something with nice, respectable antlers, then awesome. But there's so much more that goes into it. So I've followed that mantra, and that's kind of what applied on this morning. Is like, man, we've just been busting our asses out here, and this is the best deer we've seen, and we're going to do this. So he ended up kind of just doing his thing. He was sniffing the ground, trying to figure out what was going on with those does, because they had milled around for a while. So it was funny to watch him follow their scent trail, and they had gone off to my right, and they had walked back and forth and done circles. And it was like he was retracing all their steps in front of us. And I knew that he was just about to go back into an open shooting lane because that was the path that they had taken. And he was just following it like a blueprint. And he started to go back out in that direction. And Logan had the camera ready. And I knew that I was going to have to just take a risk on raising the crossbow when he was in plain sight. And when I did, he saw me, of course, and he buggered about 10 yards. And I wasn't sure if he was just going to take off out of there, but he stopped. And he looked back, and he was perfectly broadside. And I squared it up and shot him.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah, just aim for what my friend calls the vital V, and watched him go maybe 25 or 30 yards. He actually died right behind that scrape and trail camera that we had put out.
Dang.
Within 48 hours before, he ran right behind that, piled up by a deadfall, and
that's it.
You see people who film hunts, and sometimes people will like film their hands shaking afterwards, and sometimes, or a lot of the time, I would say it's probably a little bit of fabrication. Like, yeah, people are doing it for the camera or whatever. And I've filmed a lot of hunts, probably, I don't know, 70, maybe more. And I've never had somebody film that where your hands start shaking after you shoot something. But I had Logan film it because I looked down at my hands and they were just trembling. And it was like, when I shot that deer, it felt like the first deer I'd ever shot when I was 12 years old. I shot a buck fawn, and my hands were just shaking uncontrollably, and that's what it was. And so I come out here thinking I might shoot a 3+-year-old giant out here
Booner
in this country, and it wasn't that big of a buck, but it made me happy. I shot what made me happy. It was that whole thing with deer hunting and it's the reason why we do it, to have these interactions and just kind of living in the moment and just going off what your instincts tell you. And I decided I wanted to shoot that deer, so it was cool.
That's what it's all about. Well, moral of the story, going through all the shit that y'all went through, what do you tell the hunters out there that are going through all that same shit? Stands, they got crappy stands they're trying to put up. They're going through crap. Things just happen. What's your one piece of advice, Josh and Logan? I want to hear from you too.
I could try to come up with some like fancy romantic answer about deer hunting, but really what it comes down to is, even during the rut, with whitetails, yes, there's always luck involved. You hear about the guy who's going out there in his blue jeans, who smokes a pack a day, who's out there in his stand puffing down Marlboros.
In his red flannel.
Yeah, in his red flannel, drinking coffee on his phone, and he shoots a booner. Of course that happens. But by and large, when it comes to deer hunting and deer hunting success, it's all about time. It's all about putting in the time. You have to be out there. And even with the best laid setups, it's really about time in the stand, putting your ass in the stand, whether you're hunting from the stand or a ground blind or just in a natural blind like we were. Even during the rut, you just have to grind it out. And you have to approach every single day like it's the first day, because it is. Because the dynamic out there is changing every minute. And
the weather hasn't been consistent at all.
No.
It's changed every day.
And this has been the extremes and the bad extremes, I guess you could say, but weather changes nonstop always. And it affects those animals in ways that we still are trying to figure out with science. So it's kind of, if you think about it in the right light, it's actually kind of motivational, because a lot of things that we do in life where you try to achieve success, it's pretty well calculated. Yeah. But with hunting, all the conditions are so volatile and just ever changing that any given moment the circumstances could turn the tides where you're going to be put into a position where you can, whatever your definition of success is, you could succeed.
Yeah.
And with deer movement, I mean, we're still a far ways away from being able to figure out why deer do what they do.
Yeah.
Even though we probably invested more in whitetail deer research than any other big game species. But like, the reality is you just got to be out there and just be there when the opportunity presents itself. So it'd be easy to give up 2-3 days into a tough hunt and think that nothing's going to happen, or maybe I should just come out next week. But no, you got to be out. Just go out, hunt when you can. And be
I
out
got
there as
one
much
more
as you
than
can.
left. Got one left. Logan.
Yep.
You're a new hunter, right?
Yeah, I'm
You're a big bass fisherman.
fairly new to hunting in general, but
Okay.
I would have to agree a lot with Josh, just coming from the bass fishing side of things, putting in time and putting in effort and all that, it'll all pay off in the end. But I think just for being a new hunter and learning all this, overcoming that like mental mindset of just sitting there all day, and especially with Josh. I mean, no,
Smelling sunrises and kicking porcupines.
it's actually very fun to be in the stand with Josh. But
dude,
overcoming
yeah.
that mental mindset of just sitting there day after day and just always trying to be alert and all that, it's a challenge. And if you can overcome that, I think it'll all pay off in the end.
Aaron, have we put in enough time to kill a deer tomorrow morning?
Oh yeah, dude. I wouldn't like. We should do the math on how long we've sat in that tree stand.
I was trying to do that a minute ago and it made my head hurt.
I don't think I can count that high, to be honest. It's. I know the one day. I think it was Friday. I did the math. It was like 11 hours
One day.
in one day.
Yeah, because we just came in for a quick hour and a half lunch.
I think you guys have done close to 50 hours in that stand.
I feel like
Yeah.
we've done 100.
It feels like
I'm sure.
It feels like a million.
We're getting there.
We have to.
As long as I don't screw it up.
Yeah. If you don't miss, we'll be good.
I love it. Well, fellas, I appreciate you degenerates hopping on the podcast with me. This has been a hell of a week. I know I want to make this a yearly tradition now. Like, just this camp, I know we've been talking about it, just Aaron and I know y'all were too. Like, this is the most I've laughed in a long time.
Oh, 100%.
Just like the camaraderie that we have in this camp. Like, sure, the killing, sitting in the stand, seeing big deer, like, yeah, that's part of it, but I think the camaraderie in camp is huge. So I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully sharing a camp with you guys again. So, guys, appreciate y'all hopping on the podcast. And we'll see y'all next time. There you have it, everybody. Another episode of the Geared for the Outdoors podcast comes to an end. This was actually a pretty fun one, sitting in a deer camp, just talking all the crap that we've been going through on this hunt. And the deer we've been seeing, the deer we haven't been seeing. But to sum it up, didn't get a buck here in Nebraska. That's all right. I'm sure I'll be back, but I'm going to head on home back to the great state of Texas, chase after whitetail. I've had a couple of big bucks begin to show up on the cell cam, so hopefully going to get home, put an arrow through one, get a giant on the ground for you guys to see on video, talk about it on the podcast. But we just want to thank y'all again for tuning in, and we'll see y'all on the next one.